Hi guys, welcome to day 4 of this 5-day sugar-free challenge. So for some of you, you're on day 4 and you're joining me, well done. I'd love to know how it's going. I've been seeing some great comments in the feed. Some people wanting more advice on snacks, some people wondering about macronutrient ratios, other people wondering about mindset. So keep the questions coming. It's great to see you all doing this and see how you're going. For those of you, maybe you're actually starting and this is day 1, but you're just watching this. So welcome if you're just starting. And for those of you that don't know me at all, my name's Naomi Judge. I'm a naturopath and clinical nutritionist, and I help women discover the connection between their hormones, health and happiness. And this includes sugar and what sugar does to your hormones, because sugar influences insulin, it influences cortisol, testosterone, all of these hormones. So it's very important when it comes to your health and well-being, and it's super important when it comes to hormone balance, because sugar really can put those hormones out. We see conditions like polycystic ovarian syndrome, we see conditions like endometriosis, weight gain, all of those conditions, we just see sugar influences those big time. So today, one of the questions I got yesterday was about inflammation. Why is it when I eat sugar I seem to put on weight, or I get inflamed and I retain fluid? And now that's a really interesting question, because I notice this so many times with people eating sugar and they get very inflamed, they hold on to water, and you can literally put on, you could put on about, I think I said this the other day, I've had clients that overnight have gained about 3 to 4 kilos in water weight. That's a hell of a lot of water. That's a hell of a lot of weight. And it can be so disruptive to your weight loss plans. It can really set you back. It can make you feel depressed about what you're doing. You exercise and you feel like you're eating right and you have one little blowout and suddenly you pile this weight on overnight. So it can be really depressing for some, and it can make you lose that motivation. You get hesitant about what's the right thing to do. You get hesitant about the decisions you're making. So understanding what's going on with your body is the number one thing that you can do, so you can understand what is happening. Why is it I'm putting on that weight? So when we look at sugar, we've got a couple of different types of sugar and how sugar influences the body. So we've got starch that's in your grains and your nuts and your seeds. So starch is in your quinoa, starch is in your basmati rice, starch is in sweet potato, and that makes up a portion of the carbohydrate, and so that's one portion of it. And then we've got sugar, which is you've got your glucose, which is the fastest acting sugar in the body. It goes into your blood supply, and so let's just focus on that for a moment. So when you eat something, or when you eat something that's high sugar, what happens is you eat this high sugar glucose content food. If it's just glucose, it pumps that glucose into your blood, and what your body essentially does is it wants to bring down that high blood glucose in the blood. So some of that glucose might be used for energy, particularly if you're exercising, particularly if you haven't eaten since your last meal, so you've gone 5 hours without eating. Some of that glucose your body will want, because it's going, okay, we're going to use this for energy, we're going to use it for brain power, brain function, movement, breathing, all of that kind of thing. So a little bit of glucose can be okay. But when there's too much, your body says, okay, we've got a problem here. It goes and gets insulin. Insulin comes along, gets involved, and insulin's main job is to bring the glucose down in the body. Hey Lisa, how are you? I was thinking about you the other day, and I was thinking, oh, I haven't seen Lisa for a while. Not off to Parramatta today, eh? And what insulin does is its main job is to bring the glucose down, but it has to do something with the glucose. So what insulin does is it helps to turn glucose into glycogen to store in the body, liver, muscle, fat tissue. And so glycogen is stored in that way. This is the thing. When we store glycogen, we need water. So what actually happens if you have high glucose meal, or even a high starch meal, and you're eating more than your body can use in energy, your body will need to store it, and your body stores it with water. So generally, water molecules are stored with glycogen, and this is where you get that fluid retention. So you suddenly might get overnight 3 or 4 kilos of fluid has gone on. You might have had a big pasta meal, or you might have just had a tub of ice cream, and it's like, hang on a sec, how can I put that much fat on overnight? But it's the combination of the glycogen being stored, because you're not using that energy, you're not doing anything to use that energy, the glycogen and water molecules. So essentially you're just storing fluid. So a lot of people, it's like fluid retention, inflammation, and it can happen overnight. It can happen very, very quickly. And that's why a lot of people get disheartened with weight loss programs or going on diets, because they have one blowout and they put up weight. But that weight is that water weight that's stored with the glycogen when you have a high glucose or high starch meal. And that's why when you go on a few days of no carbs, so don't forget, I know I drill this home and I go on and on about this. So carbohydrate is a combination of your fiber, your sugar, and your starch. So carbohydrate is like the umbrella term of these three kind of nutrients. So fiber, which has no impact on your caloric intake. Fiber just goes through the body, acts as a prebiotic, it helps the bowel, it helps cleansing. Starch. Yes, so here we go. Okay, so Lisa's just touched on a really super important point. Actually, before I go on, I really want to talk about this, Lisa, because this is very fascinating. This is really fascinating. So, we've got glucose, and I've just talked about the insulin coming in, taking the glucose, storing it in the body. If you're not using the glucose as energy, either you've had too much glucose, you're not doing enough exercise, you're not utilizing it. So your body will store the glucose. Okay? But if you eat a lot of protein, you've got a high protein diet, tons and tons of protein, you have lots of protein snacks, and your body doesn't need all that protein, or your body doesn't know what to do with that protein, or you're going through stress. When we go through stress, our body does this. Our body goes through a process called gluconeogenesis, and that is converting the protein into glucose. And this happens particularly when you're stressed. So if you eat lots of protein and you're exercising intensely, your body might be turning that protein into glucose. It happens when there's mixed messages in the body. And it can also happen when you're not doing any exercise or you're not doing any weight-bearing exercise. So you have a big protein meal, your body for some reason turns that protein into glucose, boom, it's stored in the body with glycogen and water. So again, you've got the same fluid retention. So you're absolutely right. It could be doing that, Lisa. It could be doing it for a number of different reasons. Methylation, stress. Two reasons, or maybe you're low in some nutrients, or maybe your body's just, you're not doing the weight-bearing exercise to say to your body, okay, I need that protein as amino acids to actually make muscle. And that can happen as well. There's a few other reasons that we might be making more fluid and fat rather than muscle, but those would be the main reasons. So a little bit of weight-bearing exercise will go a long way. Less intense cardio and a little bit of weight-bearing exercise will go a long way to tell your body that it needs that protein to store as muscle. Love that. I think that's the best, because I get lots of clients saying, why can't I lose weight? Why can't I lose weight? I don't eat any carbs and I eat tons and tons of protein. I'm always eating protein. And that's why. Yeah, definitely, Lisa. So I just got to think of what would be going on there. But definitely the estrogen... the elevated estrogen can be triggering cortisol. Yes, the elevated estrogen can be triggering cortisol. The higher your cortisol, Lisa, the more likely you are to turn protein to glucose. So high cortisol causes protein to glucose. And that's where estrogen involvement will come in there. So that's so interesting. I love that. Okay, yeah, it's difficult when you go out. I mean, I always think, we err on the side of more leafy green vegetables. Don't go too OTT on the protein. Yeah, so that's elevation. It is elevated. If that's first thing in the morning. I mean, we want cortisol to be highish in the morning, but we don't want it to be extremely high. So we definitely want to look at that, the stress and the overall cortisol, Lisa. But also we want to look at the cortisol metabolites. But I just love that you asked that question, and you're absolutely right, and you've noticed something that does happen, and a lot of people don't know that. So when we look at the starch, though, when we look at the starch and the glucose as a carbohydrate and see what your body does to those, I've actually lost my thread now. So I'm going to go into one other thing I wanted to point out today. I know. I know that you've got a fabulous diet, Lisa. I absolutely know you do. And I know that you eat so well. In terms of eating well, so Casey's just saying I only eat raw sugar cane. So raw sugar cane, I mean, I'm not sure how you eat it, Casey, but if it's been extracted from the raw sugar cane, what you've got there with the raw sugar cane is you've got nutrients there. It's still some glucose and it's still a bit of fructose, but it does have the nutrients. But this is what happens. It's still going to, even if things are raw, they're better for you because of the nutrient value. So raw sugar, raw honey, raw maple syrup, all of those. Casey, you're eating it all, so that means you're getting the fibre. And what the fibre essentially does is that kind of counteracts the high sugar content and makes it kind of lower GI. So that's where that comes in, and that's where eating the whole food can actually be quite beneficial. You're getting the whole, and you're getting the nice nutrients. Sugar has some nice electrolytes in as well, but you're still going to get you're still going to get that blood sugar rise, definitely there. So you want to make sure you time when you eat it and all of that. Now, I heard something the other day which I just wanted to touch on. How can we help to break down the glucose or store glycogen? I've started taking lipoic acid. I can't metabolize carbs. So not being able to metabolize carbs, hi there, not being able to metabolize carbs, I mean, I'd have to know a little bit more about what the problem is, but basically, you can do two things with the starch or the sugar in food. So when you have it, the insulin needs to come along and it needs to take the glucose out of the blood and it needs to store it. So you can do a couple of different things. One, if you're having high starch meal or high sugar meal, you can counteract the effect on your blood with having fat or protein or more fiber. So that can have an effect on what happens to your blood sugar. If you're finding the insulin's not doing what it wants to do, so if you're finding after a main meal, for instance, you're craving something sweet, it might be because you're insulin resistant. So the area you need to work on is actually your insulin resistance. If the insulin is not being triggered, or it's being triggered and it's not doing its job, and it's not getting the glucose from your blood and doing what it needs to do with it, then you need to work on that insulin resistance, and that means cutting out sugar, that means doing the 5-day sugar-free challenge, that means having things like vanilla, cinnamon, chromium, magnesium, and to help with your insulin resistance. Third thing is, if you're finding that you're getting too much glucose in the blood and it's just not going down, exercise. Once you start exercising, it will help bring your blood glucose down. But definitely, if you've got any insulin resistance, any metabolic syndrome, and I just saw Casey write about being diabetic. If you're diabetic, you need to be really careful with your sugar intake and just make sure that you're keeping nice and leveled and not having too much sugar on its own. And that's what we talk about in snacking. So making sure that your meals have a little bit of starch. So starch is lower GI, and like I said, starch is in things like quinoa, basmati rice, your legumes, your lentils. So things like that are really good to help with your blood sugar levels, as opposed to having pure glucose. Because if you have pure glucose, that goes straight into your blood, and what that does is that can influence your insulin. Now, being diabetic, type 1 or type 2 is different, but being a type 2 diabetic, you're not necessarily low in insulin. It might not, it's good to get your insulin tested. Insulin is a huge part of regulating your blood sugar. So if you get your insulin tested and your insulin is low in your blood, okay, you might be having some issues producing insulin. But if your insulin is high and you've got any blood sugar problems, then what you know is your body's not using that blood sugar that insulin correctly. So that's what. Yeah, I wasn't sure, Casey, because I recognise your name. I wasn't too sure but definitely that's what's going on. So what I was trying to explain in terms of the starch, I heard the other day that having a starchy meal coupled with fat is exactly the same as having a Mars bar, exactly the same as eating ice cream. And that's kind of BS. It's not exactly the same because starch and glucose are very different. Even though they end up in the same place, your body goes through different processes to break the starch down and to break the glucose down. So there's another process involved. So you've got the starch from things like your quinoa, your basmati rice, sweet potato. Your body then breaks that down into glucose and does what it needs to do, but it goes through a process. Whereas if you've just got glucose, your body then goes and stores it. If it's in the blood, your body then goes and stores it in the muscle, in the liver as glycogen. So that's why eating starch, a bit of starch, is actually okay. So I was asked the question the other day about basmati rice, and the question was, you recommend basmati rice. Why do you recommend basmati rice? I thought it encouraged weight gain, and I thought it wasn't as good for you. But the fact is, you just need to look at the starch value. And the starch in basmati rice is pretty... The starch in the basmati rice is pretty similar to the starch in quinoa. So in terms of... The only benefit quinoa has is it's got more fibre in, it's got more protein in, but it's similar to the starch value in basmati rice. So if you're choosing between something like quinoa, basmati rice, buckwheat, don't choose it because of the starch value. Choose it because of the added value. So the added value of the B vitamins in the quinoa, or the protein, or the fibre. But there's similar values in starch. So you need to treat quinoa and buckwheat similar to how you would treat basmati rice, and just have it a lower portion in your meals. So if you were to just have, like, say, all quinoa salad, that's a whole hit of starch. Yeah, so Lisa, definitely, sorry, I'm getting carried away with seeing all the comments. Some of them aren't really related to this, Lisa. But Lisa, definitely basmati rice is fantastic for kids, because what happens is you actually use the starch in the basmati rice quite easily. So it's a really good way to get energy into the kids. And it's kind of good for digestion. It's a low impact on the digestive system. So it's a really good choice. So thanks, Lisa. But I wanted to touch on that. I wanted to touch on basmati rice is okay to use. But remember, you need to balance out your macronutrients. You need to look at how much you should be having at each meal and really try and keep that down. So about 10%, I would say. Keeping it down to about 10% is a really great way to do it. I think that was all I wanted to touch on today. But what I wanted to know how you're all doing. How is your 5-day challenge going? And if you've got any questions, please let me know. So tomorrow is day number 4. So it's one more Facebook Live. So if you've got any questions, I would love to answer those tomorrow on day 5 of the 5-day sugar-free challenge. I can't wait. And of course, tomorrow, Friday at 12:30, Brenda and myself are doing 6 simple steps to reset your hormones and shed stubborn weight. So that's going to be tomorrow at 12:30, and we're going to be focusing on diet and toxins then. So that's going to be a really cool webinar. It's free and it's at 12:30 tomorrow. So I can't wait for that. I know a few of you have already done that. So if you've got any recommendations, or you had some good input on how you went, feel free to leave it in the comments. I think, Lisa, that you did it last time, so feel free to leave some feedback just so others know. Yeah, so quinoa is a really good... The reason I like quinoa, Karen, is because it's kind of a good... it does have the high protein, and it does have the high fibre in it, and it's also got lots of B nutrients. But it's really great to use as sort of an alternative. Did you enjoy the breakthrough program? I think, yeah. Oh, thanks. We actually kick off on the 15th, the day after Valentine's Day. So everyone can go out and they can have a nice Valentine's meal and then come back and get straight into breakthrough on the 15th. So I'm looking forward to that. It's kicking off on the 15th. So I do have one more thing I wanted to touch on, but I'm not going to do this in this one. I might try and pop on later on. I've been getting tons and tons of questions about snacks. So I'm going to do a special one on snacks, what snacks to eat, how to balance your snacks out so the snacks actually take you to the next meal. So we're going to do that. Oh, I'm dying here in the heat. Whoa, it's so hot here. I've got the sun coming through. But thank you so much all for joining. And I'm going to pop on. I'll let you know when I'll come and do a Facebook Live on snacks. And I'm going to be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Talking about day 5 and giving you a few tips for day 5. And if you've got a specific question, I'm going to try and get it in tomorrow. So tomorrow's your last chance to get the questions in. And then at 12:30 tomorrow, we go straight into 6 simple steps to reset your hormones and shed stubborn weights. Yes, okay, Lisa, no problem. We'll do that. Yeah, we'll talk about snacks and balancing snacks, and I'll get something through to you as well. I'll do that. Thank you so much. Thanks, guys, for joining. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Karen. And I'll see you all tomorrow at 11 a.m. Bye.